Good evening, good evening, and welcome back to YBC Revolt Talk. I am Tanya Dunbar, founder of YBC, and tonight is our season finale where we'll be discussing healing, healthy, and happiness, the final wrap. We invite you all to please be sure to like, follow, and share all of our social media outlets on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at YBC Revolt. Tonight, I am joined by YBC members Rachel and Harold Kaufman. Hey guys,
Hello, hello.
how y'all doing?
I'm great.
Yeah, we're gonna have a What you say?
The Friday.
Oh yeah, it is the day before Friday, like the day before the holiday time frame for most people, right? So we're excited about that. So our show tonight is co-sponsored by the Factory 10, a mother-daughter owned and operated business where we are focused on making your visions a reality, one design at a time, and co-sponsored by PGD Innovations, where their mission is to inspire, connect, and educate today's youth to empower our communities. So tonight we've got a lot of giveaways throughout our discussion.
Yes.
So hopefully you guys stay tuned in so that you can find out what's going on. Now I'm gonna go ahead and give my disclaimer because I am running our back end production and our front end production tonight. So y'all bear with me. Right? We're gonna get through this together one moment at a time. So don't pay me any mind if I'm looking over to the side because that's so I can make sure everything is running as smoothly as possible. But tonight we're going to jump into our first giveaway, which is being provided by PGD Innovations from their shirt line, I Am Legend. So you get a shirt of your choice. So let's get started with our Black Health Trivia. Okay, so y'all know I'm extra, so I got to get my get to my little tune, right? Because I didn't do that yet.
Wait, you got props and stuff?
Yeah.
Harold, don't touch me. You know I got my Jeopardy music. Don't do that. Don't do that. Rachel, you said something?
Hey.
Jermaine, you know what? I'm not gonna do this with either one of y'all tonight. I'm not gonna do it. Okay. So let's get into our first question. It is in 2018, 58.2% of Black young adults with serious mental illness did not receive treatment. Because only 2% of this organization members are Black, making it harder for Black Americans to find a therapist that shares their ethnic background. So what organization only has 2% of Black membership? So we're going to start a little music. Carol, stop laughing. Serious situation. We need our music. You are really laughing. Stop it. Hey guys, what organization? Anybody got a guess?
Well, it's a hard one. Do more than one thing.
Okay, we haven't gotten any answers, so per usual, we're going to circle back to that question a little bit later in our show while you guys go Google it, because I know that's what y'all do. All right. So we're going to move on. So let's talk tonight, healing, healthy, and happiness. The final wrap. This is again our season finale to our health series, and we are joined tonight by a panel of special guests, 3 phenomenal women. So let's just jump into our introductions. Our first guest, Dr. Kendra Richardson. Dr. Richardson was born and raised in Gastonia, North Carolina. She attended North Carolina Central University, Eagle Pride, where she majored in biology with a minor in chemistry. After college, she worked several years in medical research at various institutions, including the National Institute of Health in Bethesda, Maryland. She obtained her medical degree from Meharry Medical College in Nashville, Tennessee. She completed her family medicine residency at Carolinas Medical Center in Charlotte, North Carolina. Dr. Richardson has always had a passion for preventative medicine, women's health, and mental health awareness. She encourages her patients to take an active approach to their health and helps them understand their body and mind are all connected. expected. Dr. Richardson currently is a primary care physician with the Department of Veteran Affairs, where she takes pride in serving those that have served our country. When not treating patients, Dr. Richardson loves to travel, enjoy international foods, work out, and play with her pup, Weber. And the most important fact that Dr. Richardson left out of her bio that I inserted is that she's a member of the illustrious sorority of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and my line sister of Alpha Lambda Spring '04. Woo-hoo. Our second guest is Professor Asha Winfield. She is a doctoral candidate at Texas A&M University in the Department of Communication, where she studies the stories of Black individuals and groups occurring in the media, culture, and society. As a researcher and filmmaker, her goal is to use intersectionality, critical race theory, and Black feminist thought to frame and center the stories and experiences of Black people as it relates to audience reception, identity making, and storytelling. She is a published scholar researcher with work in health communication and women's studies and communications journals, with publications on Black images, stereotypes, possibilities, and outcomes. Asha focuses on the impacts of Black stories or stories about Blackness and Black people on Black people, from consumption engagement to outcomes as it relates to individual and collective memory. She is currently finishing her dissertation on Say Her Name, Tell Her Story, exploring Black collective memory, nostalgic narratives, and critical representation in Black women's biopics. Asha is a 2012 graduate of Lamar University in Beaumont, Texas, and received her master's from the University of Houston in 2015. She is the proud owner of Productions by Asha, film, video, and photography business, where she and her team capture life's greatest moments. And last but definitely not least, our third and returning guest, Dr. Monedia Elzey. Dr. Elzey is a licensed psychotherapist with over 24 years of experience treating children and adults in individual, couple, family, and group settings. She specializes in depression, anxiety, trauma, and adjustment disorders. Dr. Elzey does not believe in a one-size-fits-all approach to therapy, therefore tailors her treatment approach to the unique needs and personalities of each client and client system while using an integrative therapeutic treatment approach. In addition to being a certified clinical trauma professional, she is also certified in Ericksonian hypnotherapy, solution-focused therapy, and eye movement integration therapy. She has a doctorate in couple and family therapy and a master in social work. She also has extensive training in other modalities such as cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness therapy, strategic family and family systems therapy, among other treatment strategies. Dr. Elzey is currently in private practice based in South Carolina. Please join me in welcoming all of these three phenomenal ladies to our show. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
We are excited to be amongst such accomplished women. Sorry, Harold, I know you're like kind of, the outlier to the group. So tonight we are going to talk about several topics as we bring together topics that have occurred throughout our series, right? So we're going to just jump right in. And again, we're excited to have all of you. The first topic that we're going to touch on is a topic that is it's the forefront of everything that's kind of happening today, right? Which is COVID, the pandemic, COVID-19, however you want to refer to it. So my first question is for you, Dr. Richardson. As a primary care physician, what are your recommendations for this flu season that we're in as we continue to fight the COVID pandemic?
So thank you for having me on the show. Thank you all. So first, I would definitely say that I'm glad you asked that question, because the flu season and the flu virus is still amongst us and it's not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so I have personally seen in my practice more patients have been willing to get the flu vaccine than ever before because of fears of the coronavirus of COVID-19. So one thing we do have to remember is that flu is a virus and it does weaken our immune system. The second thing we know is that the flu vaccine is effective, but that also varies from year to year. I believe 3 years ago, the flu vaccine was only about 20 to 30% effective. That's not great. Last year was about 60%, which is still not great, but it's better than zero. And so we have to realize that the virus weakens our immune system if we do get the virus. And with the weakened immune system, we're at higher risk of getting other infections such as pneumonia and the coronavirus. So we have to remember that the flu vaccine is available. It's been around for years, and it does protect us. What we do know in science is that vaccines are a preventative measure. They're primary prevention. And so I encourage all of my patients, all of my family to get the flu vaccine. The other thing we have to remember is that while we are fighting this pandemic, we're also treating heart attacks, we're treating strokes, we're treating cancer. And so we're also treating patients with flu, and patients with the flu do get hospitalized, and they become very critical. If we have all of these layers and we're not controlling these other comorbidities, then we're going to overburden our healthcare system, which is already overburdened by coronavirus. So we do have to think about that.
No, and so you bring up a good point, right? You're talking about the vaccines, and we know that, there's been much talk about the latest COVID vaccine, and specifically the Black community's mistrust of the medical community, right? So what indicators would you say that the Black community should look for to ensure the vaccine is safe?
So I will be 100% honest. When I first heard about the vaccine, I was skeptical. I'm not going to lie. I was skeptical. I was the one who walked around and said, I'm not getting the vaccine until, I see someone else get it. That was me. And then I have to think about, as a healthcare provider, I have to be a voice for my patients, people who look like me. Because I can't expect my patients to go and research and read this literature on the vaccine. I can't expect them to do that. So I have to do that. Right. So I started doing my research and reading the trials that Moderna has put out, AstraZeneca has put out, and Pfizer has put out. And so the more I read, I became more comfortable with the vaccine. And now I will get the vaccine. Now I'm 100% okay with getting the vaccine. So a couple things that we need to look at, we need to kind of demyth some of these things that are going on, that it's going to get in our DNA, it's been microchipped. We need to debunk these myths because that is absolutely not true. So one thing we need to look at is that the coronavirus is an mRNA vaccine. It does not enter our nucleus, so it cannot change our DNA. I don't even think there's technology out there to microchip a vaccine. I don't even think we have that technology. There's been a lot of concerns that the vaccine was rushed. It wasn't necessarily rushed, it was a speedy process, but that was because we had tunnel vision. We had industries across the world that worked together with the government to make this vaccine. And we had adequate funding for that. We have never had that before when it came to making vaccines. So that's why we see that it became on the forefront a little quicker than most vaccines. I heard a lot of people saying, oh, this is the first vaccine, I'm going to wait and see how people respond to it. But we have already done the studies. Pfizer's third trial study had over 40,000 patients in the study, and it was 95% effective. And then people are concerned about side effects. There was 1 or 2 grade 3 side effects in that study, and 3.8% of patients experienced fatigue and 2% experienced headache. Those were the worst of the side effects. I think we can handle that to protect ourselves from coronavirus.
No,
the good thing about this study as well is that they had safety protocols that had to get past the FDA and the EUA. They have met all of those safety protocols. The mRNA vaccine is different from the flu vaccine or MMR because there's no inactive or quiet virus that enters your body. It's completely mRNA. And it causes your body to read this protein and have an immune response. So it's very effective. Now, what we don't know, and I think the entities need to be honest about what we don't know. And we don't know about long-term immunity. We don't know how it affects people who have already had coronavirus. The study did not include kids and did not include pregnant women. There were some patients who got pregnant during the trial, but were not pregnant before. So there's some stuff we don't know, and I think we need to be honest about that. The other issue that I've heard patients talk about is the lack of diversity. Black people are underrepresented in clinical trials in general. Only about 5% of Black people or minorities are seen in clinical trials, and we make up about 13% of the population. That comes from a lot of distrust in the government. We know that. The one trial that we all know about is the Tuskegee study, and that study was in 1932. So we're still being affected by that in 2020. And so one thing I want people to realize is that that Tuskegee study was harmful. It was dishonest. But in 1932, we didn't have the IRB. And what IRB is, it's an institutional review board that when you do a study on human subjects, you have to have an informed consent on anything you do. And your patients have to be aware of what they're being treated for. So that has changed since 1932. So, and I understand rightfully so, we are very hesitant when it comes to healthcare and community because it's not just Tuskegee. It was HIV and AIDS. It was the HeLa cells. So it's been more than just that, but we're still being affected by it. And also what we do know, and I'm sorry, I hate to be winded, but this is very important, vaccines in general, but Black people with anything are more times likely to be affected than our white counterparts, than anything, you name it, HIV, heart attack, stroke, diabetes, coronavirus. It doesn't matter. We are always going to have a higher risk, unfortunately. And so coronavirus is no different. And so now that we have a vaccine that can prevent this, that leads to, such high morbidity and mortality, I would encourage the people of color and minorities to take advantage of this. I was listening to the Breakfast Club one morning, and Common had said, Black people, we need to think about this, and they're just trying to do whatever, and they're in our communities rushing the vaccine on us. They're not worried about poverty and da-da-da. And I think it would do a disservice to Black people because if we had the vaccine, it was $1 million, hypothetically, and only the rich and the wealthy could get it. And then we're still going to be disadvantaged, and we're going to wonder, well, why don't they care about the Black folks? And so we have to ask ourselves, what is it that we want? What is it that we need that's going to build a stronger community in the long term?
Dr. Richardson, we have a question from the audience actually in reference to this. So the question is, what about those test patients that suffered with Bell palsy? Did you read it in reference to that?
So on the Pfizer study, I didn't see any serious adverse effects such as Bell palsy, and I read that study pretty in detail. So that could have been one of the Moderna studies or the AstraZeneca, but I don't recall.
I was just going to ask, can we stop and say, what is Bell palsy? Because I don't know what we're talking about.
So basically, it's inflammation of a facial nerve. It can cause facial paralysis. It's not deadly. It's just, it can be painful, but there's treatment for it. But I'm not aware of.
Is it permanent?
So you can be treated for it, and some people do have recurrences, and some people have side effects. Like some people will still have a little bit of facial weakness or facial drooping, but usually you recover 100%.
Okay.
So, Asha, I know that you are currently producing a documentary about the impact of COVID on the Black community. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, first I would like to also say thank y'all so much for having me. I started the documentary this summer. I was talking to friends who are just all over the United States, and everybody had a different story, and they were impacted in different ways, but they were impacted. And the researcher in me was like, well, we can record this. Let's see if IRB will approve it, and they did. They put some rush that they have never put rush in any other study that I've ever done, but they were like, yeah, you can go ahead without it. So I interviewed 30 Black individuals from around the country. We put the call out, and I just wanted people to feel free enough to talk about the hurts that came with the pandemic. I think we heard a lot about the statistics, but I wanted to make space for Black people to tell their stories. I had classmates who lost parents. I had friends who lost friends and cousins, and it just felt like the weight of it all, on top of still trying to be this professional person, still trying to run businesses, still trying to teach their children, still trying to show up in all the ways that we have to show up, that we miss that opportunity to sit and grieve, right? So in that documentary, I said it's opportunity to make space for us to just talk. I'm not a therapist. I'm not trained in any way. But as a researcher, we are trying to listen, right? To make space for people to tell their stories. And it's important for me to do it. I'm at a PWI, and I said if nobody else was going to make space to talk about how this pandemic was impacting us, I was going to do it. And I did. And it was amazing. We posted the flyer to Facebook, and I think I had maybe 15 people reach out within a week, and it kind of snowballed from there. We had funeral directors who were telling us just the impact that it made, just for them to constantly, right? You're in the business, and so you know that you will be funeralizing people and memorializing people, but for that impact, the way that it hit, to constantly be in that space where you are grieving, but you can't grieve the way you've been grieving, right? They had limitations during the summer where, Black folks, we are famous for how we grieve. Okay, we know how to put a funeral on. But we couldn't do that, right? People couldn't touch their loved ones, and that's just so big when we're grieving. We couldn't spend that time with the loved ones, right? So many loved ones, they were talking about how they passed and they were alone, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted us to make space to talk about that because it impacts us. There are individuals who were a part of the documentary who said they still think about it, right? They didn't have the time they needed to say goodbye, and they never really will. But we had the opportunity to talk about their loved one, right? So one of my participants talked about losing her grandmother, and we just made space to talk about Granny, right? We talked about how Granny liked to shout, how Granny was a praiser, how Granny was there for everything up until the very end.
So I think I want to just add to that. I think it's really important to do that type of work because many of us, I don't think we've actually sat back and thought about the fact that we've been locked in our houses for 9 months, and like what was it like when the world just kind of stopped and everybody had to go home. I know a lot of friends have talked about, oh, I wish I would have started journaling when all of this would have started, but I know many of us didn't do that because at the onset they said, oh, it's just going to be a 2-week shutdown. After 2 weeks, it's going to clear out. It's going to be all done, and then we'll be back to our normal days. And here we are in December going through a second wave of shutdowns, and it's looking like it's going to be for another 6 months, 8 months.
Well, and so that brings up a very good point, right? We know, first of all, that research is critical because I think the other part that has had a huge impact on 2020 for especially people of color is that we've had a huge coming of civil unrest coming to the forefront, right? We know that it has been happening for many years, but this year was the year that it was really highlighted and really put in the front for no one to be able to close a blind eye to, right? It was put right before us. But it's a great segue into our next segment. And Dr. Elzey, this question is for you because we're talking about people being in isolation, and we're talking about physical health. And we know that the mind and the physical health kind of go hand in hand, right? So how important is the mind when talking about physical health, and what role do you think it plays?
Mm-hmm. The mind is extremely important in talking about physical health. If you are experiencing chronic stress for an extended period of time, for example, it can cause high blood pressure. It can cause it can cause heart problems. It can cause help me out, doctor. It can cause
obesity. It can cause diabetes.
Yeah.
Chronic sinus issues, colds, everything.
Yeah. So yes, they were, and also it's the flip side too. Physical conditions can affect your mental health, like thyroid conditions can create anxiety, and heart problems can create anxiety, and depression and other disorders like that. So they're co-entwined.
No, that's real true. So, Dr. Richardson, in light of your work with veterans and the current COVID pandemic and many people feeling isolated, what advice would you give for preventative mental health care?
So, mental health awareness is like my jam. Like, I don't know why I'm not a psychiatrist, but I kind of did want to be a psychiatrist. I was in med school, but anyway. So a lot of times I think we need to be mindful, be present. And this is not the time to be a hero. This is not the time to be strong. This is the time to ask for help and reach out when you need it. And so what I tell myself and my family is ask for help when you need it. Take time for yourself. Find an outlet. An outlet could be going for a walk. It could be working out. It could be playing video games. Whatever it is that works for you, journaling, find that outlet and do that. And be okay with not being okay. A lot of times I see in my patients and sometimes myself, people get upset and they get stressed or, they have anxiety about something. And they start to think that something's wrong with them. And so that makes them more anxious and more depressed because the world is a happy world and everybody around me is happy, but I'm so depressed and I'm having panic attacks. And they start thinking there's something wrong with them, but it's nothing wrong. Having a panic attack is a physiological response. So there's nothing wrong with you. And so I encourage people to realize, be okay with not being okay. And reach out to therapy. I think everybody in America, in the world, should go to therapy and have a therapist. It's been the best thing for me, and it works if you want it to work. And if you really take time, put yourself first, and reach out and talk to someone, not your friends. You can talk to your friends. That's okay. Not your preacher, not your pastor, but a licensed therapist.
So, Dr. Elzey, I'll ask you the same question. Yeah. What are your thoughts and what is your advice you would give for preventative mental health care?
I share everything that she said, for sure. I think that everyone, and we talked about this the last time I was on with you, everybody can benefit from a therapist. Your problem doesn't have to be a chemical imbalance that requires medication. It can just be simply adjusting to what's going on with the changes in your personal life and the changed world. So don't wait until it becomes a major impediment in your life. Go early, go soon. And if you can't go see a therapist, then you can do more things like mindfulness, things like relaxation, yoga, learning how to breathe and relax, listen to meditation tapes, things like that. I get a new hobby, read, something to distract yourself from the anxiety that you may be feeling or the depression. You can't reach out to people, unfortunately, in person, but that doesn't stop you from reaching out on Facebook, reaching out on FaceTime, reaching out on Zoom. So you need to connect with people as much as possible.
Okay. No, that makes great sense. And Dr. Elzey, how would someone decide? So Dr. Richardson just alluded to it's good to have a licensed therapist, right? Not necessarily your pastor, but how would someone decide between seeking help from a spiritual leader, licensed professional, or more of a sponsor relationship where you just need someone to talk to, right? What are some of the tips they could use to figure out what method is best for them?
Well, we certainly know that having spiritual beliefs is a major coping tool. So that's very important for people to have that as their base to fall back on when they're struggling. So if you are having a spiritual crisis, for example, you may want to reach out to a spiritual leader and have conversations centered around that if you're struggling in that regard. You can get help from people if you just need, who aren't licensed necessarily, if you are just needing support, you're going through grief, you're going through a personal loss, getting help from a spiritual leader can be very helpful in those particular situations. But if you have a chemical imbalance, for example, like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or clinical depression, where you need medication to manage your condition, you really need to see a licensed therapist. And also, if you are having issues related to childhood trauma or you have post-traumatic stress disorder, you really need to see a licensed professional.
No, great information. So we're gonna take just a brief pause moment here and interject some Black health trivia before we go into our next segment. Dr. Richardson, Dr. Elzey, Asha, you guys are like giving great gems tonight. So I hope that our viewers are walking away with a lot of valuable information. I know, audience, you guys have some other questions. We're gonna come back to those. We haven't forgotten, so we will circle back. But for a
Wait, I
pause
can
moment,
interject just for a second.
absolutely.
I am also a member of Delta Sigma
Listen, Sarah. So see, listen, your niece over here failed to make me aware of this information the last time you were on. We're just gonna put her in a bubble because she doesn't understand the importance of that, but we are glad to have you in the number.
Lay that out there.
Absolutely, Dr. Elzey. Thank you so much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is Black Health Trivia time. And yes, I am very extra. So our next question, let me get my little music ready again. And Harold, don't be laughing over there. Keep comments and chuckles to thyself. Our next question is, Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die than white women during blank. All right.
Can we answer?
No, Kendra. Come on, somebody out here knows this. We have a winner. Okay, our first person to chime in that I saw was Leslie Morrow. Yay, childbirth. Great job.
Wait, there were 2 others before her.
There was more. Oh, there was somebody before. I'm sorry.
Nicholas,
Okay, so listen. All y'all came in at the same time. Okay, so all of y'all are gonna win a prize. We will just give away 3 prizes. Why not? All right. So Nicholas, Mamie Prize, all of y'all win a prize. We are giving away our a tumbler, I think is the prize. Sorry, I'm unprepared tonight, y'all. You get a tumbler of your choice. You're going to email info.thefactory10@gmail.com and just put in the subject line winner, and then I'll send you back some options for a tumbler. Okay. All right. Thank you guys for participating. All right. So this is a good segue in terms of talking about women and their health, right? Asha, we've been talking about the mistrust in the Black community feels towards the medical community, and as an avid researcher, you have explored this from the perspective of the Black woman, specifically around uterine fibroids. Before we jump into some of the importance around self-advocation, can you tell us more about your recently published article about your own personal experiences with uterine fibroids?
Absolutely. Whoop whoop to the publication. Took a little minute, but we're here now. Okay. I really think it started off in class. I was in class and we were talking about these opportunities to share our stories in ways that I didn't know I had the opportunity to. I didn't even know I had access to share my story in that way. I just thought, you tell it to your homegirls, like, hey, if you're bleeding kind of heavy, you might want to go to the doctor, leave it there. But I was in this class and we were talking about our narratives and we were talking about the wounded storyteller. And I just got really emotional, thinking about my own experiences and trying to be this strong Black woman that I had heard of, not realizing how much that image hindered me from my own seeking for my own health advocacy, right? And so I remember being in class. I remember them telling us that we can write about these moments and that they could really impact those who are in health communication or who are doing health, whether they are practitioners or researchers. And I got to it last year. I wanted to talk about my experiences. I was an active follower of the White Dress Project. And they talk about Black women with uterine fibroids. And I felt like finally I have a community of people who aren't afraid to share. For so long, I felt like I had, I guess, really changed my entire life to fit the schedule of my cycle. And it may not sound like a lot, but it was. I would plan trips around my cycle because I knew it was just going to be bad. If I had tests during that week, I would have to just pack extra pads, just a whole wardrobe just in case things went bad. And I wanted to talk about those experiences because I found out from this social media forum, if you will, that there were other people out here experiencing it. And we just weren't talking about it. I wanted to talk about it in my church and not just during testimony time. Okay. I can't get no help. I wanted to talk about it with my family, but I didn't know how, right? How do I tell my big brothers that there's a part of my body that I can't control, and that is literally draining the life out of me? And so in researcher form, I decided to write about it, and I found the outlet to do it. I pushed myself to be very vulnerable and very transparent because I think healing starts there. I can't help you if I don't know what's happening. They can't help me if they don't know what's happening.
That's
I
true.
talk about my experiences in looking for a Black woman doctor, looking high and looking low, and I ain't finding in College Station. And the ones I found were leaving. They were chunking up the deuces, and I was like, Lord help your girl today, because the doctors that I had in College Station while I'm finishing this degree, yeah. They were trying to help you, girl, not in the ways that I wanted to be helped. They had a lot of things that I could try. We tried every medicine I think they had samples of. Okay, and that's a lot on the body.
Right.
Some were free, some weren't, but I'm grateful for the insurance and what it covered. A lot of the treatments that I was trying to try for myself, I ended up in Houston, right? They were treating every symptom. So we tried, they were talking about doing embolization, and I was like, well, how does that affect me if I want to have beautiful Black babies? And they were like, yeah, this is probably not the one for you. We did a whole lot of tests trying to figure out how they were growing so big and at the rate that they were growing. And I just felt really, just everything that you can imagine being on those tables. I think in my mind, the first time I would have an ultrasound, I would have some fine Black man next to me holding my hand. Can I say it like that? And we would be looking at our babies on the ultrasound. And that's not what happened. The first time they rolled that ultrasound for me, they were telling me how big my fibroids were and how many issues I would have because they were so big. They were telling me about all the things that would go wrong and not all the things that would go right. And it was heartbreaking. And I wanted to write about those experiences. And I
Yes,
did.
let's talk a little bit about that, right? Asha, what are some of the statistics as a part of your research? The warning signs or symptoms of fibroids for Black women. What should they look out for? And Dr. Richardson, feel free to chime in here.
So the heavy bleeding was the number one. There were some cycles that lasted so long they didn't stop. Like, this is not a cycle, this is not a period, this is a very long sentence, and it just won't stop. The clotting and the cramping, just unimaginable. I was very anemic, and they couldn't figure out why. They said it was low enough to get iron infusions, but not blood infusions. And so I was getting iron infusions while also being a doctoral student and going to class. And so that was the whole thing. Just being really fatigued, right? The pain is not just in the abdomen and like the pelvic area. I also had back pains that were out of this world. I can remember being in middle school and almost passing out. And I can remember one cycle being so bad, they had to like roll me with a wheelchair. And like some of the football players told my brother, like, hey, I saw your sister in a wheelchair today. And he was like, what is happening with you? And I was just like, I don't even know what to tell you. The nurse told me that I should have been more prepared. And I was like, this is not real life. So yeah, just the pain, the amount of bleeding, if you are bleeding and it's not stopping, it shows up in so many other ways, right? Some people have really, really bad headaches along with it. And so if you are experiencing a cocktail of all of those things, you know, you may want to find Not what I did. I went to WebMD and they told me it was real bad, and so then I went to a regular doctor.
So I have a question about this because it seems like it's not just you, right? A lot of my women friends are suffering from this. Is this something that's super common? And maybe Dr. Richardson can chime in on this.
Fibroids are definitely more common in African American women, and we don't really know why. I mean, fibroids and like endometriosis, and a lot of it is cyclic, so it's hormone dependent. So that's why when women get their cycles, they feel the pain a little bit more, because it is estrogen dominant or hormone dependent. And I don't know the numbers, but it's definitely higher in Black women and minorities. And so some of the symptoms that you mentioned, Asha, are definitely correct. The heavy menstrual cycles, the prolonged bleeding, what we call menorrhagia or dysmenorrhagia if you have pain with it. And a lot of women sometimes, depending on their body habits, so they get bloated. You can kind of see, some of the fibroids if they get really big. Now, it's benign, it's not cancerous, but it definitely does hinder your lifestyle, and it definitely does cause a lot of the symptoms of fatigue and increased bleeding. And a lot of times we'll start women on birth control to help control their hormones. Sometimes we'll put different hormonal therapies in the uterus to slow the bleeding down. Embolization is one where they actually nick some of the arteries that are causing the bleeding. Myomectomies are removing the fibroids are another option. And some women, you're right, don't know they have it. I talked to a friend of mine. We went to med school. Well, she's a dentist, but we went to graduate school together. And she went throughout high school and part of her dental career, not knowing she had fibroids. She thought her heavy cycles were normal and everybody was having them.
Right.
But they were not. She had no idea. And she just went to the doctor and they did an ultrasound and was like, you have the fibroids the size of a grapefruit. Had no idea. And so I think it is important for women to be advocates to know their bodies, because everybody's cycle is different. We know that. But you start to see a pattern if you pay attention. Mm-hmm. And it's important to go to your doctor, your OBGYN, and let them know what's going on and advocate for yourself. If you don't want a certain procedure, don't do it. If you don't want to take birth control pills, don't do it. Mm-hmm. But you also need to be aware of what could happen if you don't do these interventions. So I tell patients to advocate for yourself. But what I'm going to do as a provider is I'm going to tell you the pros and the cons, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then you can make an informed decision off that.
I think you said something so key is just that normalization of pain with Black women. Because I remember having conversations later after this was published, and cousins and aunts were like, "Oh, I didn't know you had fibroids. I have them too." And all the Black women in our family had them, and I was like, "Well, where were these conversations about our health when I was really struggling?" So I talk about it in that article. I call it our loud healing. And that we can't get the help that we need unless we are okay with saying, I have a little issue. Does it work, family? How did y'all manage this? Because I'm out here trying to be a professional woman and I can't do it if I'm leaving. Okay.
Well, actually, I think you bring up a good point, right? Which is, and that point spans across not just fibroids, but I think mental health and all other physical health aspects, which is the genetic aspect of things that can genetically be passed on, that we need to have more conversations, especially as a Black people, about our health, our mental health, our physical health, things that our body is experiencing, because we don't do enough of that. I know there are some things that I discovered here recently that I'm like, oh, I have that, but yeah, my mama has it, my daddy had it, and I'm like, well, nobody said anything, and while those things are not necessarily life-threatening, it's still good to be informed about them, because now I can pass that information along to my child and say, hey, these are some things you need to be cognizant of or think about, because sometimes you can be doing all the right things, but genetically you can't control that you're going to experience those type of health impacts, right? So just a good thing that we start having a conversation amongst ourselves. Before we get into our last question for all of you ladies, I do want to circle back. We had someone on one of our viewers, Kendra. It was a question for you, and they wanted to know if you could speak to further recommendation for individuals in getting the COVID vaccine who already suffer with immune deficiencies or their systems already compromised?
So that is an excellent question. And I know in the Pfizer study, the first and second trial, they did not have a lot of patients. Usually those stages of trials, they're small studies anyway. In the third trial, they did try to include people who have some heart disease and things like that. So if you are immunocompromised, vaccines are, you do have to be careful about the vaccines. Live vaccines, you cannot get, especially if you're on medicine and you're already immunocompromised. Now, while they didn't specifically say it's okay for immunocompromised, but we can conclude that because the vaccine is an mRNA virus and it's not a live virus, it's not a live attenuated virus, and it's not a killed virus. There's no viral particles in the vaccine. It's strictly mRNA. It's a piece of information that your body reads to make a protein to mount an immune response. And so we can conclude that it will be safe to use in patients who are immunocompromised.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Richardson, for that information. Okay, so take us on home. I have one last question that is really geared towards all three of you. And so I'll start, Asha, with you. And just knowing we've talked about, high mortality rates amongst Black women, the importance or the mistrust of the Black community, and then the healthcare community. And we touched on this subject. I heard all of you kind of mention this, which is self-advocation, right? Could you talk about from your perspective why it's important to be your own self-advocate? And then it'll be the same question for you, Dr. Richardson, followed by Dr. Elzey.
Okay. I think it starts with us, right? Nobody else is going to experience our pain except us, or our symptoms except us. If it means first starting off with a journal and saying these are the things that I'm experiencing on these days so that I can tell it to my provider, then I do that. I'm a researcher at heart and I have a lot of questions. And so always being mindful that if I want to be here and I want to live this beautiful life, then I'm going to have to fight to live. That means I'm going to have to research things myself. I'm going to have to ask those questions. But I think it's also important to make sure I'm asking the right questions to the right audience, right? I'm not going to be asking my friends about the COVID-19 vaccine.
Right.
I'm not. But I think that's a part of our community, right? And so we get we have our opinion leaders, right? We talk about that in communication, people who help us to kind of think through and process how we want to go about these decisions that impact us. But that self-advocacy, it definitely starts with us and it impacts everybody around us. We see that right now, how the holidays are coming and you better advocate for yourself. You're going to have to lock the doors on some family members. Especially if they're not wearing masks, because I want to see y'all again, and I don't want to see you in a casket. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That advocacy also looks like doing research and making sure that it's peer reviewed. And everybody may not do that, but if you are the person in your community who is doing that, share that information in a way where that it's palatable for everybody else who's reading it, right? So if you know how to bullet point some stuff, you did Cornell notes in high school, can you do that for your family? Come on. Because it starts with us, but it impacts everybody around us, right? So if it's my health, everybody around me is impacted, especially if they love me and they see me going through. But if it's this pandemic, me taking care of myself is taking care of my community. And I have to make sure that I'm not only sharing these stories about other people and how they've been impacted and how their stories impact us to make different and better decisions. It can't stay there. And I'm really big on making sure the research that we do is not just for these white pages and these white halls and white ivory towers, okay? It has to be for the community, right? If we want to see each other next year, we're going to have to make some decisions that impact us. that are even bigger for our community, for our families, for our children, for our students, for our patients.
Very true. Dr. Richardson, what is your perspective on self-advocacy?
I agree with everything, and I think self-advocacy for me, I look at it from a patient standpoint because I too am a patient, and from a physician standpoint because I am a physician. And I think from a patient standpoint, self-advocacy is taking charge. Self-advocacy is being aware of what is going on with your body, being aware of your disabilities, and acknowledging that. I have a lot of patients who come to me that's had diabetes for 10 years. And one patient today said, I did not take this serious. And he's now 68 years old. So I think it means knowing your disabilities and being aware and taking an active approach in your own health. And that means that when you come to the doctor and talk to the physician about your medical problems, you listen to the good, the bad, and the ugly and make a decision. Take your medication, exercise, eat whole food, exercise. These are simple things that we know and have studied for years that reduces morbidity and mortality. That's no myth about that. And so when I want patients to advocate for themselves, I want them to also take an active approach in their health as well. As a physician, I advocate for my patients. Me working at the VA, there's a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of red tape, and sometimes I have to knock on a few doors to get things done for my patients because I feel like they deserve it. It may not be in protocol, but this is what they need. So I have to advocate for my patients as well, especially those who can't advocate for themselves, whether it's some type of cognitive issue or lack of education. I have to advocate for them. And so it means standing up, taking charge, and using your voice to get things done.
Awesome. And Dr. Elzey, last but definitely not least, our now known Sarah. What is your perspective from, the mental health area of the importance of self-advocacy?
Well, you know yourself better than anybody else, and you cannot let anybody else tell you what's wrong with you or what's not wrong with you. And I had a client once who had a hip replacement, and the physicians kept telling her, and she was in chronic pain. They kept telling her nothing was wrong with her. So they sent her to therapy to deal with it. She needed pain pills. The psychiatrist thought she was like a pain pill seeker. And it turned out a year later, they were recalling the hip because they were in the hip. So she knew something was wrong with her, and she just needed somebody to listen. And fortunately for her, she kept on and on and on. And if one doctor listened, and you need to go different with mental health. If you see a therapist and you don't feel that person is helping you, don't just quit therapy. Find another therapist. So keep looking until you get the right match for you. Because just because a person's trained doesn't mean they're the right person for you.
Ooh. That was a good way to end it, Dr. Elzey, because you are right. That is a snap, right? You definitely cannot just you gotta self-advocate, and you cannot be dependent on the fact that somebody has a degree or a license or certification in something. And I think you guys all summed it up well. It really boils down to doing the research yourself, reading up and being prepared and coming there asking the right questions, right? I know every time I go to the doctor, my mom, I'm like, what are we going for? What's the issues? And I'm like asking her all these questions. She's looking at me like, why are you asking this? Because I got multiple questions for the doctor when we get in here to follow up to what you're telling me you feel, right? Because we need to know. If you don't ask, they won't tell you. They don't necessarily tell you. So you got to ask and make sure that they know that you are care about yourself first and foremost. We thank you, ladies, for being on here. Before we wrap up with ending with some Black health trivia, do you like, ladies, let's see, we'll start with Dr. Richardson. You want to share how people can contact you if they have further questions?
Yes. So I am on Instagram at Kendra_Richardson_MD and Facebook at Kendra Richardson.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Richardson. Professor Asha, how can the people reach out to you if they are looking to get in contact with you?
It's just Asha, but here we go. If you want to see some beautiful pictures of beautiful Black people, you can go to www.productionsbyasha.com. Don't call me or text me. We can take that one off right there. But you can
Actually, you sent it to me, so I put it on there, girl.
Nobody's gonna call. I'm sorry, nobody's gonna call. But you can email aswinfield@tamu.edu. I love to connect with people, so that would be awesome. Also on Facebook and Instagram, it's just Asha Winfield. Come on with the quick edits. Come on.
We on it. We on it. We do it. We do it from the back end. All right. Thank you, Asha. And then Dr. Elzey, last time I know you shared your email address that people can reach you at. Anything else you want to leave with the people with, Dr. Elzey?
drelzey@gmail.com. That's how you can reach me.
Absolutely. Thank you all for joining us. Before we end tonight, we're going to go back to a couple of Black Health Trivia questions that we have so we can do a few more giveaways. So first, we're going to circle back to our original question. Since now we have all the people in, hopefully somebody's taking the time to go look up the answer. But our first question of the night was, in 2018, 58.2% of Black young adults with serious mental illness did not receive treatment because only 2% of this organization's members are Black, making it harder for Black Americans to find a therapist that shares their ethnic background. What is the name of the organization? And my music is coming, so y'all getting a little bit.
I was going to say, you forgot your music.
No, I did not. Did not. Give me a second. What's the name of the organization?
This is hard. I don't.
Is this hard? Okay, we might have to post this one as a drawing then.
2% of this organization's members are Black.
Dr. Elzey knows.
Okay, that's what I was thinking as well.
All right, nobody still got that one, so we're going to post that one as a drawing. We'll come back to that. But our last health trivia question of the night. Let's see here. Let me get to it. All right. So although Black Americans represent only 12% of the U.S. population, they accounted for 43% of new blank diagnosis in 2018, and an estimated 42% of people are living with it. It is a disease or a condition. So I'll read it one more time. Although Black Americans represent only 12% of the U.S. population, they accounted for 43% of new blank diagnosis in 2018, and an estimated 42% of people are living with it. I'm giving y'all a head start. Let me get back to my music.
You want the doctor. So what's that? Diabetes?
Yeah, no, none of those. Hypertension, no. Getting closer, people. Come on. Y'all gonna make us do a drawing for this one too? Sickle cell, no. Okay, nobody got that one too. So we're going to just do a drawing. We're going to give you guys an opportunity to go do a little research. Please go to our page on Facebook, and those that get the answer right, we'll do a live draw. We'll enter you in the drawing and do a live drawing so that you guys can win additional prizes. All righty. So let me take us off our screen here. So this has been an awesome talk, and I think a wrap up to the importance of healthcare series, right? We hope that those of you who have been joining us not only tonight, but throughout the series are walking away with just a little more educational knowledge about your health, both physical and mental, because after all, health is wealth. We look forward to you all tuning in when we return in February 2021, and look out for our next season series announcements to come after the holidays. We from YBC Revolt Talk are wishing you all a very Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. Until next time, this has been YBC Revolt Talk.